Gothenburg is Sweden's second biggest city, and many people actually prefer it over Stockholm. Those people are obviously insane, but just for the benefit of doubt, let's explore what Gothenburg has to offer. This weekend is actually a bit special, because Gothenburg turns 400 years old and there's lots of celebrations all over town. But it's actually all based on a lie. The west coast of Sweden used to belong to Denmark, and it wasn't until the early 1200s that Sweden got a small strip of 15-kilometer coastal land here. That strip of land is essentially where Gothenburg is today. The Swedes built a fort here in the 1300s, and that slowly grew into a settlement as well. By the 1600s, the Danes had taken the fort twice and forced the Swedes to pay an outrageous amount of money to get it back, both times. But the Swedes paid up and continued to live here. Essentially, there's been a Swedish settlement here at this location for much more than 400 years. So where's this 400-year celebration coming from? That's because the city of Gothenburg, or Göteborg as it's called in Swedish, got its city privileges exactly 400 years ago. Except that it actually didn't. It got its city privileges in 1621. In 1921, Gothenburg was preparing to celebrate turning 300 years old, and lots of construction projects got started. The amusement park Liseberg, the botanical gardens, the Museum of Natural History, and a lot more got constructed for this celebration. They also wanted to put on an exhibition, the biggest exhibition ever in the Nordics with 4.2 million visitors, but it got delayed 2 years. So Gothenburg celebrated turning 300 years old in 1923 instead, 2 years after the actual date. And this tradition of tardiness continues, because now Gothenburg is celebrating turning 400 years old in 2023, even though it's actually turning 402. There's a lot to see and do in Gothenburg. At some point you're definitely gonna end up at Avenyn, the Avenue Parade Street. The street was given its name in 1867, but many people back then actually didn't like the name. It sounded too foreign. Avenue isn't a proper Swedish-sounding name. There was a proposal to name it after the king instead and give it a proper-sounding street name. But that proposal was revoked once people living on the street learned that they would have to pay the cost of the address change themselves. I'm not saying that the people of Gothenburg are cheap, but I'm not saying that they aren't. At the end of Avenyn, you find the Poseidon statue at Götaplatsen. Poseidon has guarded Gothenburg since 1931, and it's a very famous piece of art in the city. It was also part of an April Fool's joke in 2011, when it was announced that Poseidon would get a bigger ding-dong to be more anatomically correct. You can learn more about that in my video all about April Fool's jokes in Sweden. Feskekôrka is another famous place to visit in Gothenburg. It's a fish market that was built in 1874, and with my luck, it's being renovated right now. It was originally called the Fish Market, but people soon started calling it the Fish Church instead, because they thought that the building looked like a church. By 1880, the newspapers started calling it Feskekôrkan, but the name was transformed into Feskekôrkan over time. It's basically an attempt to transcribe the Swedish word for fish church into the local, very odd Gothenburg dialect. The people of Gothenburg are known to be a bit quirky. They're proud of their humor, and they actually believe that it's funny, despite all the evidence to the contrary. It's well known that everyone in Gothenburg is called Glenn, and they also have an inferiority complex to Stockholm. They will of course say that Gothenburg actually is better than Stockholm, but then again, that is what people with an inferiority complex would say. As mentioned, the people of Gothenburg has a very peculiar dialect. They don't know how to pronounce the word kex, for example. Kex means biscuit in Swedish, and it's pronounced kex, but people here say Chex. Gothenburg is also one of very few Swedish towns that have an English name as well as a Swedish name. Göteborg is the Swedish name, but as you know, you can also say Gothenburg. Gothenburg is sometimes called the Little London of Sweden. There was a lot of British influence on the town in the 1700s and the 1800s, and a lot of British people moved here. Most of them were actually Scotsmen though, and not Englishmen, but you can still see a lot of British influences on the town. If nothing else, you'll notice it in the Gothenburg pub culture. Speaking of the Little London of Sweden, there's even a pub called Lilla London at Avenyn. That's Swedish for Little London. This is basically the place to go if you fancy some fish and chips. And beer. Beer as well, I guess. Close to Lilla London, you find Rockbaren, the rock bar. This is a very good place to go out in Gothenburg. If you like sleazy people and hard rock, that is. But then again, who doesn't? I'm probably a bit early, cause the only sleazy person here right now is me. And if you're into steampunk, you should check out the Steampunk Bar. This place has an amazing decor and some pretty fancy drinks. There are many other pubs in Gothenburg, for example a tap room for the brewery Två feta grisar, two fat pigs. In general, Gothenburg has a very lively pub culture, so it does not disappoint when it comes to pubs. But let's get back to some more family-friendly activities. Gothenburg has a lot of attractions for younger kids, as well as older kids like me. Universium is a science center where you can learn all about the rainforest, space, reptiles, and a lot more. It opened in 2001 and it's a favorite spot to visit for many natives and tourists alike. Right next to Universium, you find the hotel Gothia Towers. Way up there is a spa with an outdoors jacuzzi. I'd love to show it to you, but it's really expensive. I'm just a 3-star vagabond because I can't afford to be a 5-star vagabond. And right next to Gothia Towers and Universium, you find Liseberg, the biggest amusement park in the Nordics. Liseberg opened in 1923, and it's a place filled with roller coasters, arcades, events, and a lot more. Basically, it's every kid's dream. Yes, old kids as well. I love Liseberg. Fun fact, the least amount of visitors that the park has ever had was on September 22nd, 1924, when it just had 46 visitors. Things are a little bit different today, with 3 million annual visitors. Oh, and I also love morbid facts, so I looked up that a total of 6 people have died at Liseberg. Just 2 of them were accidents in attractions though, the others were workmen and performers. So this place isn't exactly a death trap, despite those statistics. Korsvägen is an infamous intersection here in Gothenburg. No one knows where to walk here, and no one knows where to drive either for that matter. Gothenburg is a very walkable city, and very bikeable as well, but driving here is a bit of a mess. And I'm sorry to say, but the public transport isn't all that great either. Maybe it's just because they're rebuilding all over the city this summer, but I found it almost impossible to get anywhere I wanted using public transport. The trams do look pretty cool though. This is apparently Norway's house. I think they can afford a bigger one. My sister told me that Floating Saigon is actually a really good restaurant, despite being smack in the middle of a touristy area. Should we trust her? I'm not sure. Summer in Gothenburg is a perfect time to have a picnic in the park or a beer in the sun, but there are some negative sides to that. Apparently it looks like this every morning right now. That tower over there is going to be Gothenburg's highest building, and as always when you're building a tall tower, there's a lot of controversy. People say that it's ugly, but I actually like it. I think it's a nice addition to the city skyline. We mustn't forget to be a bit cultural. There's a lot of museums in Gothenburg. At the end of Avenyn, you can find the Gothenburg Museum of Art, for example. But if you're a cheap bastard, like me, then you can go to the Gothenburg Art Gallery instead, which is right next to the art museum. And this one is completely free. Except today, because they're actually installing a new exhibition right now. They're opening again tomorrow. The Museum of Natural History is a place you simply must see as well, and not just because it's free. If nothing else, you need to check out the whale room with the Malm whale. This is the world's only mounted blue whale. Other museums have blue whale skeletons, but I believe that this is actually the only whole blue whale on display. The poor whale got stranded outside of Gothenburg, and this is its final resting place among screaming kids and fascinated adults. But there are more museums to visit in Gothenburg. For example, a Volvo museum if you really want to learn about Swedish cars. And there's a very popular nautical museum called Maritiman. And a bit outside of town you find Aeroseum, an Air Force museum that's located in a shelter in a mountain. You can see tons of planes and helicopters here and learn all about aeronautic military history. That one is a Saab 29 Barrel, and this one is a Saab 35 Dragon, and over here there's a Saab 37 Viggen. And of course there's flight simulators as well. What Air Force museum would be without them? A bit rough and bare bones, but still better than flying American Airlines. Let's see what I'm gonna become when I grow up. It's exciting, isn't it? I'm gonna be a hangar sweeper. Oh well. I love the Air Force Museum in Linköping, but I think this one is almost even cooler because it's so tangible. You're so close to the planes. And it's really cool to be inside the mountain for the museum as well. Thanks to Katie and Marie as well for giving me the tip to visit this place. Katie's photo of being inside this Viggen fighter jet cockpit made me decide to come here. She's one of the fine upstanding weirdos who's joined the 3-star Vagabond Facebook group. Do you want to be a fine upstanding weirdo as well? Make sure you join us. If you're into cozy cafes and cute little stores, then you should visit the Haga district. This is actually one of the oldest areas of Gothenburg, and the name comes from the pastures that could be found here in the 1600s. This place is full of quirky stores and old architecture, but most importantly, there's a lot of fika. There's a special kind of cinnamon bun you can buy here, Hagabullen. It's big, insanely big, like you can feed a family of 5 on a single bun. I can't even hold my mic while I hold the bun. This is probably gonna be my breakfast, lunch and dinner. If you're gonna eat one of these cinnamon buns on a bench, just be prepared that the birds will be fighting for it. In the southern part of Haga, you can see Skansen-Kronan, a fortification from the late 1600s. I actually don't know the way there, so I'm trying to find a shortcut through this grove. The view from up here is magnificent, so it's well worth a little climb. Skansen-Kronan has been used as a defensive fortification and as a prison, but these days it's mostly used to host various events and parties. Parties that we are not invited to, so let's continue on a bit further south from here. There's a lot of places where you can enjoy nature in Gothenburg. The Botanical Gardens turned 100 years old this year, and it's quite a beloved part of Gothenburg. You can find around 16,000 species of plants here, and 600,000 people visit these gardens every year. It's a magnificent oasis of greenery and plant life inside the city. But there's even more greenery nearby. Slottsskogen is the biggest, oldest and most popular park in Gothenburg. It's been a place for people to relax since 1874, and it's a perfect place for a picnic or a beer in the sun. There's a zoo here, and events are put on here, and there's even a couple of strange monuments. In 2001, the Swedish band Broder Daniel played a song called Shoreline on live TV. The song became an instant hit, but they didn't release it officially until 2003. During those years, people started asking DJs to play a bootleg recording of Shoreline. Play Shoreline became a common phrase and eventually turned into a Swedish meme. And this stone is essentially a monument to the band, the song, and the meme. The funny thing is that it's actually a piece of guerrilla art. No one ordered it, and no one paid for it. It was simply placed there by a couple of artists that wanted to honor Broder Daniel. There's a lot more nature in Gothenburg. In the city center you can find another park called Trädgårdsföreningen, the Horticultural Society. It's quite popular, and it also has a very interesting building called the Palm House. It's really humid inside. Great, that's just what I wanted on a hot summer day. And if you take a ferry out to the west, you can enjoy the West Coast Archipelago. It's very nice. Not as nice as the Stockholm Archipelago, but still very nice. If you want to enjoy a simpler type of boat ride, you can go on Paddan, the Toad. It's a boat tour that will give you a lovely view of Gothenburg from the water, but only tourists ride this one. Then again, if you are a tourist, why not indulge in some really touristy things? And that's about it for this very quick look at Gothenburg, the little London of Sweden. I hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day. Oh, and there's more of Sweden to see in this video as well. There should be a link up here somewhere, I think.